How to MBSE. We're going through the entire system lifecycle in this series. Last time we showed you configuration management. Today you will learn how to verify and validate a system or process. My name is Elizabeth Steiner and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. First, let's go over some housekeeping. During the presentation, feel free to send us questions and we will get them answered in the question and answer part of the webinar. You can also interact with us on LinkedIn through the Innoslate user group or through Twitter using the handle @Innoslate. The webinar is being recorded and we will make it available to you after the live presentation, so be sure to keep an eye out for it in your inbox. Now I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Steve Dam. Dr. Dam is the president and founder of Spec Innovations, as well as one of our training instructors. He has been involved with research experiments, operations analysis, software development, systems engineering, and training for more than 50 years. He has also received an expert systems engineering professional certification from NCOSE. He currently is applying systems engineering techniques to various DoD, DOE, and commercial projects. Feel free to send Dr. Dam any questions through this webinar using the questions panel on the right. And now I'll hand over the controls to Dr. Dam and we will get started.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, start off with a little bit about how different customers view V&V. Get us a little bit into the thought processes and some of the terminology, and then very briefly, and then get into how we can develop V&V requirements, V&V plans, test suites from the beginning. And that's been a big push that we've been advocating, is trying to do a lot of your V&V up front, at least setting up for your V&V up front, I should say. And then, of course, then once you are actually executing your V&V plan, how to capture and report the test results. And then we're going to talk a little about evaluating processes using Supatra, which is our new tool for doing that. So let's jump into, V&V and DoD is a big driver in this community for how to do this kind of verification validation. They have a very kind of linear process they show mostly for the major acquisitions, and that's what I'm showing here. And this is specifically the picture here is for cyber. So it's the cyber solutions kind of side of it. So that's a big focus. And if you see in this definition from the Defense Acquisition Guide, operational effectiveness, operational suitability, and survivability, including cybersecurity, and they're taking cybersecurity as part of survivability. And those are the things that DoD focuses on and what they're trying to accomplish. So that you hear a lot of terminology talking about, does it work in the operational environment? Is it really suitable for the environment that they're working in and they're going to be actually performing combat in? So in fact, organizationally, it's kind of interesting how DoD divides itself. There's actually different assistant secretaries of defense for developmental test and evaluation and for operational test and evaluation. So they kind of separate the two. And so that's the kind of different phases that are done at different phases of the life cycle. One of the big focuses, of course, for them early in the process is the test and evaluation master plan, and that's considered critical for everything they're doing in this process. And that is supposed to be done early in some of the early milestones. So a first draft of the temp is usually done in milestone A. By milestone A. And the reason for that, as you think about it, DoD supports major test ranges and facilities worldwide, and they get scheduled. They're a limited capability, so limited availability, and so you really have to schedule those often many years in advance. There is also an entire command that focuses on interoperability testing, the JITC. Joint Interoperability Test Command. So again, these are the kinds of things that go on in DoD and the way they look at it. But you go to another customer like NASA, and they look at it fairly differently. They use very different terminology. So they talk about product verification processes and the product validation processes. And here's some definitions from the NASA handbook about what they see those to be. And, that's kind of interesting, but I think you can map those back to the DT&E being what they mean by verification, and OT&E really is the validation side of it. And so another way we term it sometimes is that the solution specific verification is your DT&E. So you're verifying that you met the specifications for the solution. Whereas OT&E and validation really is focusing on that overall customer need level. You know, what is it that they're really trying to accomplish at the mission level? And so that's where validation comes into place. That's another way to look at it. So anyway, different customers going to frame things in different terms, and they'll have different processes. But again, really the fundamental end goals are pretty much the same. What we did, of course, if you have your own organization, you're going to define your own processes for a V&V. I'm sorry, doing the wrong thing. And we actually have a process that's kind of interesting. If you go up the V, we took that top right corner process, which we call our Starship Enterprise process for obvious reasons. But it focuses on the idea that you have design monitoring going on continuously, integration, you have planning happening. Of course, that hopefully that happens early, but it happens, it gets updated as you go through the process. And then of course your V&V itself. So and those aspects of it. And so the process for V&V is the diagram that I'm showing here. And in it, we go through, and particularly looking at, we're going to verify or validate to whatever that set of requirements are. So again, if you're doing verification, it's at the specification level usually, whereas the validation is occurring at the user need or higher level requirements, mission needs statements, things that kind of level that you're trying to make sure you're validating to. And of course, then we always look for, are there deficiencies and how do we resolve those? And of course, we put risk analysis in all our processes because we know risk analysis is really critical for what we do in anything. And also then regression testing. So again, that's a software term, tends to be, but you do effectively the same thing on the hardware side. And so we have that as part of our process as well. Of course, the key is this revolves all around a knowledge base. Having a knowledge base, which is a database of the information you're capturing, is critical. So we use Innoslate as that. We designed Innoslate to be that SE knowledge base, so we can ingest and bring in information from all kinds of places, capture all the work products, and generate work products out of that database. So that's what we use. We also can use it to help us conduct analyses, particularly simulation, modeling simulation, and create the necessary report outputs that people are looking for. So having a process is always important, but you're going to tailor your process to your tool to a great extent. What are your tool's capabilities? What can it support? And so you have to make sure that does the tool really meet all the needs I really have? And so that's what you sit down and work through. And we feel like we have done that with Innoslate. And so that's how we've applied it and are currently using it. So again, where does the systems that V&Vs fit into the life cycle? Well, kind of almost everywhere. They basically if you think about it, you're going to start your planning in documents view, you're going to create your test plans, things like that. You're going to do verification requirements and requirements view. You're going to do some modeling and simulation. That's a good way to start your V&V process early. In fact, we try to create models and simulate them in the very earliest parts of the life cycle as we're building out the requirements, as we're driving requirements from the user needs. So we want to use that as a mechanism to help us, and ultimately you can calibrate that model to your test data, and that model then can become predictive. And so that's, again, something we're trying to do more and more in this whole digital engineering side of things. And of course, you know, that happens then at the design level when you're doing unit testing and things like that. You're doing that against these different requirements as well. So all that happens these different levels. And of course, there's a programmatic side, right? You have with it, where you have the different cost of as part of your planning for your V&V. You know, scheduling is very critical. Risk analysis is very important. So all this kind of programmatic side of it is also something you really are going to do in preparing through the V&V cycle. So you know, so many people focus and say, well, V&V happens on the right side of the V. No, you're doing parts of V&V all the way through this process. Supatra, we've put out on the O&M side of the tail of the V, and that's there because it reminds us that we are going to be looking at our operational processes. But of course, again, your operational processes are something you're going to be deriving or developing, hopefully, in your modeling stage. And so if you build it there, then you can start creating those SOPs that can help you also build your training program. So you think about all the things you want to do to get a product out the door. It can really help you tie it all together if you think about V&V up front. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen enough. People tend to say, well, that's going to happen later. I'm not going to worry about it now. It's not. I don't want to spend the money on it now. No, it takes a little bit of money to spend it on up front, and then you'll have a much better solution at the end. So how do we develop those requirements and plans and test suites and stuff from the beginning? So what we recommend, again, is create your requirements document.
Dr. Dam, I believe we lost audio. Hold on a moment, we're having some technical issues. I apologize, everyone.
Comcast doing bad things to us. Okay. Hopefully it's working okay. If anybody's having a problem, let us know, please.
We're getting some good
okay.
comments. We're hearing you now.
I'm sorry.
We're hearing you now.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Okay. Was I going in and out?
We lost you there for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I was so afraid of it because it was giving me an error message, a connection error message. Okay, so let me just quickly reiterate what I was saying. So again, starting with the validation requirements, where we're translating the customer needs into implementation independent requirements. That's what we're trying to do at this first juncture, and then using those to make sure that we want to. Those are going to be how we're going to do validation. Again, you're going to do something similar for verification. Okay, once you have this set of requirements, you would go through and do that decomposition to get down to a point where I can create a specification for what needs to be bought or built, and then I would use those verification requirements to show how I'm going to prove that that is what I wanted to buy or build. So those are solution dependent requirements, implementation dependent requirements. Then of course, test suite, test plans can be created here in test suites. Test plans are another type of document and documents view in Innoslate. So you can build those. We do have some templates for the test plans. I think we used a NASA template in particular and a CDC template, I think are a couple of templates we have. You can of course add your own templates as well. So that's another thing that is available. This is really essential to part of your planning, because again, you really want to make sure you identify long lead items, the test facilities I mentioned, but also if you have to build automated test equipment, that has its own life cycle that you want to create for developing that part of the effort. And so that can take on a life on its own. Again, preliminary test suites can be set up with this, and again, you can tie it back to the requirements, link it back, and we'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then, so by doing that planning, I can say, well, here's my test cases I'm going to do, and then here's my expected result that I have, and so I can kind of have all that up front, ready to go. So when we actually do execute the V&V, we can do that much faster. Now, obviously, by the way, as you go downstream, you're doing your design monitoring, and you'll be refining these test cases. You'll be refining what you expect for results and things like that. So as you learn, you can use this to help you grow and improve what you're doing as you go. Of course, you want to make sure that traceability is there. So again, this is where we would link them together using a traceability matrix. So this is taking and looking at the traceability matrix from the open statement starting at the test suite level, and then you create this, and I use a query for this because I set up all my verification requirements starting with VR, and so that makes a very simple way to do that. Now, what's nice too about this traceability matrix is we use natural language processing to read the name, number, and description of both the test cases, which you're seeing there in the rows, and the columns, which are my verification requirements. And so it can actually look at that information and determine what's the likelihood of it being connected. And if we see a very dark green, that's a good indicator that those two have been well connected together. That means that usually that the description of the test case is sufficient to match the kinds of things that are being looked for in the verification requirement. The darker the green, the higher the probability. Similarly with the red, that's the suspect assist, and so the darker the red, the less likely. And again, sometimes that's because it's not complete in your information that you need to have in there. So if you're doing it this way and you're creating the checklist first, which oftentimes is something people do, then before they flesh out the description of the test case, for example, then it would remind me, oh yeah, I want to make sure I check for that appropriate markings in my propellant management sub-assembly test. So that's, those are the kinds of things that you could make sure are explicitly there. So again, these are aids to help you do a better job. They're not going to do the job for you. Okay, so you still have to do the engineering work to do it, but it does help you with the bookkeeping side of it. Okay, so going on, some of the methods, verification methods for requirements, again, those are set up as labels in Innoslate. So if you go to the verification requirements document, you can see what those labels are. The standard ones are analysis, demonstration, inspection, modeling, simulation, test. Now you might have some other ones you want to add, and that's not a problem. You can go to the schema editor and add some more labels. The only trick is you have to make sure that the parent label is this thing called verification method, so that it gets incorporated in with the other places we use verification method. Things like your labels that will show up on your test center, and also your labels that show up on your some of the matrices that are auto-generated, like the VCRM, things like that. Again, labels, if you do need to adjust any of these labels, they are provided at the organization level. Remember that Innoslate has an organization sandbox, security sandbox, and within it you can have multiple projects that can talk to each other, but you can't talk outside. So so this is another way of working that. So again, if it's something you are doing normally organizationally, that you would want it organization-wide anyway. So moving on, so how do we capture and report test results in Innoslate? So again, Test Center is a good place to start. You can also, there's a place for actual results and status tracking, and then there's a status roll-up. So those are all set for you to be able to capture the information. By the way, notice also that we have test suites, and I didn't mention that earlier, probably should have, but this is the test suites are set up so you can have multiple types of tests. So I might have my system level acceptance test, but I might also have a factory acceptance test. I might have, there's just a lot of types of tests I might want to do. And by the way, we use the word test because it was short. V&V gets really long after a while. So please understand that we mean all the methods. We don't mean just testing when we talk about Test Center. So you can use to help you track your analyses, your demonstrations, inspections, all the types of things you do in other methods you use in V&V. So please don't let that get in your way. So again, since Innoslate can support the simulation portion of V&V, that's another thing that is built into the tool, and we'll talk about that more in a second. So let's say that you do a lot of testing, you're doing automated test equipment, or using some other things like Selenium and LabVIEW and some of these other things that generate files, result files, and you want to be able to capture those. Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can associate an artifact with any of these test cases, and that artifact can then upload and contain that file. Okay, so you can track it that way. If you find that though you're going to be doing it every time, another thing we recommend is adding that file attribute using the scheme editor, okay, to the test case itself. And in fact, the example I'm showing you here, you see the file in that far column, that actually is where we did that. And so now every one of these can have a file associated with it. And so that's a much easier way, easier way for you to link those files in effectively. Another thing is that we have lots of attributes and diagrams that are associated with this. So test cases are subclass of actions, the action class. And so what that does is you inherit things like the action diagram. So I can create that top level action diagram is my set of test cases that I can see and work with, and I can use it in my planning. And so I can do the same kind of things I do with action diagrams in general, where I can create I can resource load it, I can put cost against it, I can do all that kind of analysis for my project planning for my V&V planning, my V&V plan, and have that available. And of course, also timelines can go in there, things like that. So there's just a lot more things that can be used there for that. Another thing is the attributes. So we talked about several of the attributes already, but one of the ones we haven't talked about is setup. So setup is actually one of the attributes that is in Innoslate as well already, the test case. And so you can add to that as you need to. So they give you specific setup instructions. So we thought that's a kind of a nice thing to have. By the way, there's some really nice outputs for this in terms of some of the reports that get generated for these products. But by the way, then if you say, well, gee, there's other things I want that I don't have, like file, and I mentioned file, we can add the file, and that's the upload at the very bottom there. There's also resultant link. So you can add other attributes if it's appropriate for what you're trying to do, trying to capture. So again, this lets you capture all the different information you need. And then the reports, there's several number of standard reports that are output for this as well. Again, testing, I mentioned test reports, here they are. So like anywhere else in Innoslate, when you have a view, there's a reports button at the top there. So you just click that and it then will give you the different report options you have, and then you can select what you need. So in Documents view, one of the things we have is access to all the verification types of verification matrices you might have. So I think you'll find that's very nice and very effective. On our test reports, by the way, we don't have built-in templates. We couldn't find any good standardized test report templates. If anybody's got some, please send them to us. We'd love to capture them and put them into it as a major one. But you can create your own custom template as you need to, and of course add that in and make that available for everything. Another thing is verification matrices. So you can do those as a report, but I kind of like to do it in database view. So I can create my same kind of verification matrix. Here you see it in the bottom right picture. That's actually my verification requirement there at the beginning of it. The labels are my methods, and again, those are associated with the requirement itself. And then the verified by number, name, and description there, you see those are my test cases. So again, I can get a living verification matrix right here in database view. And once you have it the way you want it, then you just save the current query, and then that matrix becomes available to anybody to use. So you can save it, particularly if you're the project owner, you can save it to the project, and then everybody has access to it. Okay, so that's kind of quick through Innoslate and the general V&V area. Now in a very specific area, doing process analysis using Sapatra is what we're going to talk about next. So Sapatra was designed to evaluate processes and procedures. And so it takes a text-based SOP, which is where most of these are, right? I mean, most of these don't have diagrams set up with them. Most people aren't doing modeling simulation. Most people are still kind of just going through and creating these SOPs textually. And then they get analyzed by subject matter experts who sit there and, well, that looks like it might work. And no, I think it's missing this, but you know, it is still a little hit and miss. So we're trying to get people to do is move into doing more analysis of these kind of things, creating the diagrams. So if we can automate that process of creation of the diagram, that's what we've done. So again, we have our own built-in NLP skill set reading this document, and then it'll generate the diagram you see at the top right. Excuse me. And that, you notice there's decomposition. So it actually, you have the option of doing it all flat, which again, most people tend to do these things flat, but I prefer hierarchies. And then you can, each one gets broken down to that one. So that's just showing just that reaches first stage coming in, and that's the diagram for it. So one of the things also in Sapatra, so Sapatra, to help do this better, it's helpful to add other information, like what are the input device names, what are my output display names, if there are acronyms being used, so you can translate the acronyms. Also, we have this idea of a time distribution database. So many of these actions have standard kinds of times or distributions of times. And usually what people use in this domain is triangular distributions. And so we actually have a database that's available for that to show you as an example for Sapatra that comes with it. So you can kind of see how to use that and create those yourself. So you may want to create those for your own types of actions as well. And there's a best practices that was determined by quite a bit of research done by George Mason University. And they've been doing work in this area for the last 20 years, looking at airline procedures in particular, were a major part of it, but they've been looking at procedures and all kinds of things. And so what they did was recommend that we generate an extra action. So you have a step, and it says, you know, something like pilot monitoring announces takeoff. So when the person's receiving it, he has to hear that command, and then make a decision about it. So we will put an extra action in there called hear and decide that's the takeoff. And so what the reason for that is that takes a certain amount of time. And then the execution of whatever that is that they have to do with the controls, then that takes other time. So that's why there's two actions put together there. So again, that's something that's been determined to be a best practice that we're trying to help be used in the field. So that gets generated for you automatically also. So again, you're not getting just each one of these lines, you're getting extra things in there that are going to help you do a better job of doing that process analysis. And this is unique. I don't know any other tool in the world that does this right now. So these are very unique features. The other thing is, from that research work that George Mason did, they came up with some special metrics that we wanted to use. And particularly the concept of an available operational time window. This is the amount of time it takes that you have available to you to do what you need to execute the procedure before something bad happens, right? And you can imagine there's a lot of bad things that can happen, right, if the procedure is done wrong, and particularly in the human critical activities, then that becomes a very important factor. And so you want to make sure your time of procedure, your TOP, is within that window, because if it isn't, then you have a high probability of failure, right? There's a probability of failure that will occur if that's the case. We call that difference the procedure buffer time. And so that's again a very easy way to calculate. Now, we had to instrument our Monte Carlo simulation to take advantage of those metrics. And so we capture those for you internally, and then we report those in the simulation. So the Monte Carlo simulator gives you the analysis of the results, and you can see where you've got green. You've got an all green situation, then you're really in good shape, right? You're everything. Your procedure buffer times are all positive, not negative, right? But if you see in this lower case, I've seen some red cropping in here. There's some instances of where the probability is such that when they overlap, there's some failures. And so it'll indicate that. Now you may have some things that are not life critical procedures, okay? So maybe a certain failure rate is acceptable, and there is actually a variable put in for that. It's called PBT desired criteria. In this case, of the instance, so you see down here, it's 5%. That's kind of, I think, a default we put in for it. You can adjust that default in the settings as well. And then it'll calculate the failures and look at it, and then if the failure rate is above that threshold of 5% in this case, it turns red, and so you'll see it in that indicator. So again, we try to make this as easy as we can for people to see it and work with it. And by the way, you notice this particular simulation was run 10,000 times, so you have pretty good confidence level in terms of your runs with this, and this doesn't take long, by the way, to do this in the simulator. So for most of these procedures are relatively simple compared to some of the other models we build. So you may have more complicated procedures. Yes, it might take a little longer, but it will help you do your job. Okay, so I can go in and show you some of the tools here. That may take us a little time. So what I want to do is I'm going to do a very quick overview of showing the tools. Some of the same things I just showed you in slide form, I'll show you in the tool itself. But I won't take too much time because I want to leave time for questions. So please put your questions in the questions box there. Okay. So a little bit here. By the way, the new version of Innoslate is up on the cloud, version 4.6, and so we are using that version now. And also Sopatra is built on Innoslate, and so it was upgraded also for 4.6 as well. Although we call that version number 1.1 for Sopatra, since it's very new. So you're gonna see some new things here in terms of dashboarding and things like that in particular. So just be aware of that. If this looks a little unfamiliar, you go, "Whoa, that's changed." Yes, it has. Okay, so again, starting in documents view, particularly with my requirements. A new thing here, by the way, is you can kind of pin it by adding a widget here. You can add more document cards, and that's what these are now. So this, again, a little different than maybe what you're used to seeing, but you can adjust it as you need to. So I pinned up a couple of these things here. So here's my verification requirements, and they're derived from other requirements, and you can see that the requirement, the rationale, the quality score, label. So again, all the same things you're used to seeing in terms of requirements. You do the exact same kind of analysis. Again, some people think you don't need to do this analysis for verification requirements. I like it. So you can always have interesting discussions about that. So back and forth. So do what you like to do, and that's all we try to make the tool so it can support just about anything. But this also shows me where I've got verified by relationships. So that's the V. If I click on it, I'll see that relationship here. If I scroll down, verified by, so that's where that's connected. So again, that's how you get to those and make those relationships. Test plans, that's another type of document we mentioned. So that's right here. I pinned them up here to make it easier. And this is a template that was created, and then we're putting in charts that we have. Of course, we can embed live charts. So this is actually a live risk diagram. Some tables are generated. Some can be generated automatically. You can also create just like embedding a diagram or chart, you can add that as well. So lots of things here. So anyway, I hopefully get the idea of that briefly. Again, if you just want to get a report out of that, it's very simple. Click the report button. Here it is, docx output. And that's a very nice output, actually. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to show you primarily is Test Center. Let's go to Test Center. So here's your set of test suites, and you can define different tests, different types of tests, different. Somebody put a toaster in there, so kind of fun. Anyway, so here's what that looks like live. Again, all that information, you click on the object and you see all its attributes and relationships. So this is where you get some of these other things like setup, things like that, relationships. What else here with that? Oh, I mentioned the fact that I want to be able to create this diagram. These test cases, all I have to do is go to open and get the action diagram, and that will be that diagram. There you go. So that's, again, the same information that we were just looking at in the test suite, and here it is, the test center. So those are all adjustable as you need to. Again, since they're in action, they have a duration, a start date, % complete. So again, you can do quite a bit of tracking of information that way. Let's go back to to get to the traceability matrix, you just go to the open tab, traceability matrix. And then you have to select what you want. So I want a query. Again, remember I said that it all started with this. Better if I use a period. And then the relationship I want is verifies. So I just start typing verifies. And there we go. Select it. This shows me then the X's are showing me what's already been selected. So if I hover over a particular cell, I get the name, number, description of both the test case and the verification requirement. And so that helps me also in my process of determining what I want. But you can also use the Traceability Assist for that purpose to help you identify things you think should be connected. And then if you've connected things, and the Suspect Assist pops up, and you can see here it's very green with this one because there's a lot of things that connect it. You can see markings are being used, the terminology. And this is why it's NLP. It's not just taking the specific keyword, it's looking at the verb form and using that to make connections. That one down below is very red, but again, that's because there's nothing in the test case. There's no description. But so again, it reminds me that I better add appropriate markings if I really want to get that tested in here as well as part of my description, my test case. And let me, in the last few minutes, let me just quickly jump to Sapatra. So this is the Sapatra dashboard. I've already loaded up an SOP that's using our import analyzer to import the document and things like that, these other databases. And so then I have a process. And once I have that, I have the model right here, and I can just click on that, and it'll take me right to the model. And then as I go look at that decomposition, you can see the detail. Now this is kind of an eye chart, but if you want to see it more detailed, just expand it up. And then here's the examples I was telling you about, the here and side. So it reads back the clearance. So again, these are there to help you do a better job of creating the timing and working with the timing. What else can I say there with that? That's good. So let's go back up. Now to simulate, all you have to do is run the simulators. By the way, you have both discrete event and Monte Carlo. We recommend mostly just working the Monte Carlo. What the discrete event will give you though is if there's a problem in the Monte Carlo, there's something where there's disconnects, missing a trigger or something like that, then it'll jump back into that discrete event one for you. And so again, just select Monte Carlo, and then in this case, you set the settings how you want it to be. And let's just, here's where the iteration number is, by the way. So you just add it there. If you're going to do it, you run it like that. Again, this one hasn't been done much with, but you can see what it looks like in general. If you want to see a better example, let's see of the output. Let's go to this one. And oops. So here's one. Again, it's a fairly complex looking diagram. But let's go ahead and simulate it. Now, this is the one, I think it's 10,000. I'm not going to do that to you. So let's just do 1,000. And you can see how fast it goes. This is, again, there's not a lot of data there, so iterating that each time and accumulating the data is fairly easy. And then here's that example showing that, yeah, it's failing. This says 7.5% versus the 5% fail rate. Okay, so I kind of, again, went through that pretty fast, so I'm sure there are lots of questions, but I'd rather focus on what your questions are than just spending a lot of time demoing. So Elizabeth, do we have questions?
We do. Thank you, Dr. Cam. Sorry. Our first question is, verification requirements are typically in section 4 of the SRD. How do you select just the VRs for traceability with the tests?
Oh, okay. So basically that's what I did by taking the traceability matrix. Let me just go back to that one. Yeah. So this traceability matrix, the vr.star is just my verification requirements. And those are ones just out of that particular document. And so I use that as a quick shortcut. You can do it through a hierarchy as well. We have other things you could do, so you could do it through that mechanism. But this is a very clean way of doing it, and that's why I like it. And you notice we use these kind of little acronyms as prefixes for the numbering scheme. This helps us remind us of where that's coming from. And so I use VR to its verification requirements. I use MN for mission needs, things like that. So again, these are just things that I created for myself. And you want to be careful with that. You want to make sure you do standard ways of doing that so that it makes sense. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Dam. Our next question is, does Innoslate have a feature that traces test case results all the way back to the system use cases, not just to the system requirements?
Again, you can use this traceability matrix to go back to anything you want to go back to. And then if you want, another thing you can do, and I guess I didn't show it, which was the spider diagram. So if I open up, go back to here and open up a spider diagram. The spider diagram will take you all your levels of traceability. So all your relationships, or you can filter it. So maybe I just want my traceability relationships. So I can do that and generate that. I must have selected one. Let me go back here. It was a user error. Try again. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, let's go back to all relationships. Regenerate it. There you go. So anyway, so basically you can adjust those as you need to, but it will take me back as far back as I need to go. So if my verification requirement then is tied to something else, it'll show me that link. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you. How do you get the action in the diagram to show the test attributes?
Show the test attributes. I'm not sure I know what you mean. We do have the ability to create other types of diagrams like hierarchy charts, and you can show what attributes you want to see if that's what you're looking for. So that's more in a hierarchy diagram is where I would do that. So that'd be a good way to see it, and then you can adjust those as you need to on the sidebar. I think that answered the question.
Can you let us know in the comments? Our next question, the example test suite has inspections. Will Innoslate test suite support other objects than test cases? Is that being considered?
I'm not sure I know what that means either. You mean the test center? Be something besides test suites, test cases? So test case is the class of information we're doing to capture that. So I'm not sure what other things you're looking for. Could you clarify that?
Please clarify that in the comments.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we received a clarification from the previous question. It showed in progress.
Oh yes, yeah. In progress is just one of the options to indicate where you are. Now, by the way, this has been set up with workflow, and so in progress right now doesn't have it. It must not have that added to it. So in past, it's also available. Yeah, but in progress has. That's surprising. Okay, yeah, this has been messed with. Failed. Yeah. So anyway, I'll have to take a look at that and see what's going on with that particular thing. But yeah, you can go ahead and put it into different states, and then it'll roll up here. That's what this is doing. So
In Documents View, can you adjust the width of the column?
in Documents View, Documents View. Let's go take a look.
I think you can instead.
Yeah.
Oh.
Most of them, yeah, I think so. There is a limit. I think at some point it can only go back so far back, but yeah, overall you can do a fairly good job at adjusting them. And of course you can add columns by just through settings. So you can add other columns here.
Has anybody attempted yet to use Innoslate for the as-built versus as-designed configuration management database?
I don't see a reason you can't do it for both of them. I mean, yeah, I don't know that anybody specifically has done that, but yeah, absolutely. There's no reason you couldn't have just a separate project with it if you wanted to do it that way. And you can also use branching and forking now. That's another thing that's available in Innoslate if you're not familiar with it. I guess best place is in yeah, right here. So yeah, branching right here is available. And of course, in managed projects, you also have the branch fork option. So there's your, so when you click on that, you can select, is it a branch or a fork? And so you can go off and create, you know, a separate branch, and maybe that's where your as builts come in. So you have your as designed, and then you do a branch for that, or fork. The purpose of the fork is if you're going to make changes and then merge them back into the main tree in the trunk. So that helped.
Dr. Dam, our next question. You mentioned custom templates for test reports. Is this only through an API, or is there another way to create custom reports?
Oh, no. It's it doesn't, the custom report that I'm talking about for templates is this. So when you create a document, you have the ability to, here's an example of my notes document. So I'm just gonna test. And so if I go to that, then if I've got one preloaded, it's right here, it's a custom template. And how do I generate that? It was, I think, the question. So that's how you would access it. How you would generate it is if I look here for, let's see, do I have just templates? Notes documents only. Yeah, my notes template. So I actually have a notes template here that I use. And so what you do to create that is you come in, you do what you need to do in this view, and then in the More tab, call it a template. And then for that document type, it'll create that as a template and then make that available for anybody to use it. Okay. So it'll then generate that every time for you.
Thank you, Dr. Dam. I'm gonna go back to a previous question that we received some clarification for and read them together. The example test suite has inspections. With Innoslate test suite support other objects than test cases. Is that being considered? Now let me get the clarification. Yes, will it support other classes with other attributes that are relevant to an inspection or an analysis?
You could subclass, yes, you could subclass test cases, for example, and they would show up here in Test Center. And so you can create special things. So if you want us to have an inspection with different attributes and different relationships, you can add that and create it. I'd recommend doing a subclass of test case, because then it will show up here in this view. But yeah, no, nothing prevents you from doing that.
That's all the questions that we've received. If we can go back to the slides, Dr. Dam.
Back to the slides. So,
yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. That concludes our question and answer portion of the webinar. I made this announcement last time, but I'm just going to go ahead and make it real quick again. Innoslate is now certified container in Platform 1 Iron Bank. If you are interested in this, please reach out to us. And we'd like to thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, we will be following up with you very soon to send you a link to the recording and the presentation slide deck. We would also like to invite you to our next webinar, Part 5, and our last part of this How to MBSE series, How to Develop a Program Management Plan, and that will be June 21st, 11 a.m. Eastern. So be sure to check your email for the invitation. We also encourage you to visit our website, check out our books and our blogs, as well as connect with us on social media. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you again for your attendance, and we hope to see you again at our next webinar. Please enjoy the rest of your day.